Well, I guess the stage was kind of set for me with the pie thing. But basically, I'm here to talk about how taste is boring. Taste is something we all think about when we think about consuming food. However, from our standpoint in food science, it's very basic. A chemical interacts with a taste receptor on your tongue, electrical signal goes to your brain, and that's perceived as taste. Now, in our line of research within our Center for Sensory Science, we kind of look beyond that. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have much of a research purpose. So what we found is that different sensory inputs can influence sweetness or another different food perception. So a sugar water that's dyed red will be perceived to be more sweet than a clear sugar water. So we can kind of start to see how the brain is already starting to play tricks on us. Beyond taste, we also have smell. So smell is often thought of as maybe a cooking thing, but you also have a very great ability to smell through your oral cavity. They call that retronasal aroma. We've all experienced eating without retronasal aroma if we've had a sinus infection, right? Nothing tastes good, but it's actually retronasal aroma. So taste, odor, and chemesthesis make up flavor. Chemesthesis is just simply other feeling factors in your oral cavity, such as the spiciness of hot peppers or the astringency of red wine, that also can contribute to a flavor but don't make up a taste or a smell in themselves. Which kind of brings us to what we do in our center. And it really is about how flavor is the best example of how your brain takes different sensory inputs and combines them into one single concept. One of the people I admire the most in my field, Dana Small, quoted the term that flavors in the brain. So when you have an eating experience, you take into account the sights, the sounds, the aromas. All these things contribute to how you view the eating experience. So it's not this simplistic interaction with taste buds that creates an eating experience. It's this multi-sensory perception. So one of the best examples of this comes with wine. So if you drink a wine, maybe a rosé wine in Provence, maybe at a cafe in Marseille at a nice slow pace, wearing a very stylish hat, you're gonna have a completely different perception of that wine if you drink it in your parents' basement out of a plastic cup at age 40. So one of the things that we do in our lab is we wanted to think how this kind of manifests itself in the real world. So we made wine labels with different colors and different angularities. Both shapes and colors have shown cross-modal associations with different tastes and aromas. And so what we continuing on, what we did is we made wine, Chardonnay, with different aroma characteristics. So we took aromas that were already present in the wine and basically spiked them, heightened them up. So we used different odorants to create very unique Chardonnays. These Chardonnays kind of ran the gamut from an oak-forward Chardonnay to a citrus-forward Chardonnay, to a buttery-forward Chardonnay, a floral-forward Chardonnay, and then a vegetative Chardonnay. So these are all different types of white wines you experience and all different types of Chardonnay. For example, a buttery Chardonnay may be more of an American thing, while the French would consider that a fault. So what we found was that there was a cross-modal association really going on with the label, the color, and the angularity, and how people perceive that wine to match the label. So if you were a winemaker, how would you design the label to best mimic and create expectation for your wine product? Because your wine is going to have a unique characteristic. How can you work that? Going beyond vision, we're looking at how sound can influence aroma or flavor. Charles Krug has actually developed an app where you can scan your bottle of champagne and it'll create a soundtrack to maximize the enjoyment that you have of your champagne. But music and wine has definitely found a strong academic relationship. And so we wanted to kind of look in our lab at different pitches of classical music. And so we played classical music in different pitches. We found that Chardonnay with a low pitch noise became more nutty. Same Chardonnay, just different soundtrack, different perception. So moving on, besides wine, we looked into other things. And one of the things that we kind of started to look at is how texture, oral processing, and flavor kind of have a synergistic effect. Around that time, there was a lot of popular press looking at how airflow is optimized when you eat slowly. Kind of maybe going back to what your grandma told you, right? Don't scarf your food. Well, me, being skeptical of popular media, wanted to do this study in our lab. So what we actually did was what any normal person would do, is we got a metronome and had people chew along to the metronome at different rates. We chose Pringles, so we had people eat potato chips at different rates to see if this idea was beyond the airflow, because we already know that the brain is the center of flavor. So it would be simplistic to assume that the airflow in your retronasal perception is the key here. So we found that actually eating quicker creates a more intense flavor perception across many different types of potato chips, but within potato chips. So thinking kind of about that, we started to understand this flavor perception in a more multi-dimensional space. So what we know about texture is that it drives chewing patterns. So you do not chew a Starburst the same way as you chew an almond, right? And so if we know that chewing patterns can influence how you perceive flavor, why not try to see if we can manipulate chewing patterns with different food science techniques to create a different flavor profile. And so what we did is we actually created potato chips at different crispness levels using humidity chambers. And we hooked somebody up to an EMG, measured their jaw muscle movements, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found was that if you create a crisper chip, you also induce mastication. So people chew more rapidly, therefore creating an increased flavor perception. So kind of a roundabout way, what we did was manipulate flavor perception by manipulating texture through understanding how oral processing is an intermediary there. And one of the I guess I'm out of time.